more people keep appearing. This is amazing.
We've
Thank you.
metastasized.
Yes, yes, we are growing, spreading like a fungus, but a good fungus. We're fun guys.
Hey.
Hey, so, so welcome everybody. Welcome to runZero Hour Hex 15, which we double checked. Todd,
Uh-huh.
what control code is 15? Hex 15?
X15, this is the negative acknowledgement
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
episode, which maybe makes sense. I don't know.
I mean, it's not bad. As
Yeah,
as these go, we ran out of device control codes, so that
right.
that makes me sad. Pretty soon we're going to get into the printables, and then it's just
Yeah,
boring,
yeah.
right?
And
Like,
we'll just have
yeah,
like comma.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but yeah. So welcome everybody to this episode of runZero Hour. My name is Rob King. I am joined by Tod Beardsley, or as he is known in French, Todd,
Yes.
and hacker extraordinaire and founder and CEO of our company, HD Moore, and making his runZero Hour debut. Applause, everybody. Matthew Kienow, who is famous for, if you've ever read any of the rapid response blog posts, his his
Oh
uh,
my
his
God.
face is often
He's
right
all over
there. Yeah,
them.
he really is. It's
He's a
just great.
machine. I think Matthew wrote, you wrote your first one, what, within like 12 hours of your hire?
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. We kind of you hit the ground running. I was gonna say we threw you into the fire, but you hit the ground running. Let's just go with
Uh-huh.
that. The
Yeah.
nicer metaphor. So so this episode is very special. Next slide, please. We took uh Hacker Summer Camp by storm. There were six, count them, six, but not actually six because how many was it, Todd?
Eight total because
Eight total.
H&T and I both got roped into panels in the last minute.
Yeah, but but there were six different talks by runZero people at Hacker Summer Camp across B-Sides, Black Hat, DEF CON. It was a lot of fun. And I saw a lot of you out there. I hope you all came up and said hi to me. But yeah, so this month we're going to kind of talk a little bit about what we talked about
Yep.
at Hacker Summer Camp. And to kick it off, we have, and this is so much fun to say, so I get to say it. I'm claiming it. We're gonna start off with Turbo Tactical Exploitation, 22 tips
Nope.
in 20 minutes, but it's actually
Nope,
30.
30. Take
So HD, take it
it away.
away.
Cool, thanks. So this is the fun talk. I did a 20-minute talk at B-Sides Las Vegas. The idea is to go through kind of like my favorite ways to break into stuff, do recon, gather data, get data back out. So effectively, it's starting from like the outside in perspective of an attacker, going all the way to, finding enough information to take your first step inside the organization, find the juiciest targets, and from there, go get the data and take the data back out again, basically. So all the different fun steps of a pen test. But the very first, most important tip out of all this, and there's some free zero day here too, is you should always run something like Responder or Flamingo or SMB server or PCAP to C-suite dump on the machine you're using to do your pen test at all times. And the reason for that is there's a lot of products out there that when you start poking them, they turn around and just give you the admin password for the domain controller. It's great. So there's a feature known as Palo Alto Networks has a feature called user ID. And effectively, whenever it sees a possible attack from an internal machine, it will then go try to authenticate to you, to the attacker, and then try to figure who's on that machine. Now, normally that's supposed to only happen on the internal segments. But again, if you're an attacker on an internal network, there you go. This is how you get the internal SSP hash for whatever the PA agent user ID is, which typically has decent permissions. However, a few years back, they made a bit of a mess up. And instead, they would actually authenticate to external-facing attackers with the user ID. So effectively, I think it was like back in 2014, I ran an internet-wide SME scan, and then I got back 5,000 domain data credentials of all Palo Alto Networks users, and we spent 2 years trying to get everyone to actually fix it. So that was the first kind of fun surprise. Is even in 2025, you can still get credentials for a national airline just by running an SMB listener and then sending scans on the internet. In addition, though, it sounds like WatchGuard firewalls thought that they wanted to be cool too, and then copy Palo Alto, and now they have the same problem as well. Or at least these user accounts are showing up, and there's a ton of WatchGuard related logins that came in as a result of doing scans. And again, these are all very large companies and banks. So, yep.
This is what it's like working with HD. He's like, oh, I did an internet-wide scan and I got like 20,000 creds, and then I got coffee.
So Responder has been around for a while. If you haven't used Flamingo, though, it's basically a Go port of Responder along with some new features. You can grab that at Atreides Partners and GitHub and Flamingo. I worked on it when I was an employee there. It's a fun tool. It'll capture like LDAP passwords, SMTP, all kinds of stuff. And it's really helpful when you can force a machine to authenticate back to you in various ways. So kind of getting into the next set of tips. So focusing on the outside inside, like DNS is still absolutely gold. If you do like a text record lookup for an organization, it used to be pretty informative. You get a list of like what are their, what are their DKIM settings, what are like their authorized mail relays, things like that. These days, it's so much more. Every time you use a third-party service like Adobe Experience Manager or something like Netlify or another third-party site, the way they all validate your domain ownership is to force you to create a text record, and those are all public. So doing a single like DNS dig text record for or dig lookup for text gives you a list of pretty much every third-party provider or company's using in the first shot really quick. So neat data. I was sharing another technique that I noticed. This is a friend of mine mentioned on a super secret Slack, but effectively, if you have a bunch of domains all in the same Cloudflare account, they'll actually share the same DNS server. And Cloudflare only has 10 unique DNS servers. And so you get about a 2.2% false positive rate of any two DNS servers being associated with a domain that are part of a different account. So it's kind of neat. You can say like, okay, for this given DNS, this given domain name, if it's something like, my, robotstore.com or something like that. And then you find another domain later on, which may be something squiffier that you aren't sure is the same person. You can actually look to see if they have the same pair of NS servers with Cloudflare, and if so, there's a really good chance of it being the same owner in the back end. Another fun tip there is, or tip there is using third-party host name scraping tools, things like Subfinder, AMAS, CRT.sh. Those are all great. The trade-off, though, is while these tools are really fast, you're sending out your query of who you're looking for to 30 different third-party services, most of them run by hackers. So if you're doing a pen test and you don't want everyone to know that you're working with a government agency or a large Fortune 500, you probably can't use these tools in the current form, or you will leak that data out to third parties. However, if you want to get the same type of data, you can do it yourself. And a lot of folks don't realize that you can just literally go download the .com database. You could download .net, .org, all the GTLDs. You register the service called CZDS, you get a quick login, you request the zones, and then you can basically download and play with all the raw data for all the domain registrations with almost everything except for CCTLDs are available in that set. So that's another great way to find other related domains for your target, or see if there's other related domains that you don't know about as the IT person. Separately, the certificate transparency is the way that tools like CRT.sh work with, and you can actually just directly query CT without going through a third-party database by running various tools. I included one in the session called CTail, but effectively it'll monitor all of the domains while they're being registered live and stream them down your screen. You can filter into things like that. Separately, Nmap, even a lot of folks use it for port scans. You can actually point it at someone's name server on the external network and tell it to brute force reverse IPs of the internal network as well. So Nmap is weirdly good at doing DNS brute force, even though a lot of folks don't realize you can use it. And then the last tip here is using DNS resolvers to ping devices that are behind a firewall. So if you have a DNS resolver that's on both the internal network and external network, you can then ask that resolver to try to resolve domains where the name server is resolved to internal IPs. And based on the timing mechanisms, you can determine does that internal IP exist. So effectively, you can ping scan an internal network from the outside just by querying a DNS server that lives at the edge. So fun tips there, or tips there, apparently I can't say it today. And from there, we're going to go forward to the next step, which is how do you actually crack the edge? Manny did a great report covering 2024 of all the initial access vectors for incidents they covered. And the majority of them were one of four security appliances. It was Palo Alto, it was Fortinet, it was Avanti. I think there's a longer tail, maybe a separate Avanti bug as well. But SLVPN security appliances tend to be this weakest link for a lot of organizations outside in just off the bat. Separately, you can also go after the developers. So you can find a list of all the GitHub accounts for people who work at the company. You can then pull all their dot files, pull all the other stuff, look for references to internal resources, figure out how they do work internally. You get a lot of really useful data about the internal environment from external developer repositories. Once you have a list of developers, you can also take the SSH public keys from GitHub, which are available to anybody, and then you can try to actually log in with those public keys only to any devices that you think are owned by the company. And you can quickly say, hey, the developer over here actually has SSH access to this machine over here through SSH. And you confirm all that by doing this half authentication using just the public key. It's a neat way to figure out whether you can actually, if you take over this developer's account, what does it actually give you access to? And then generally, you want to find things on the edge of the network that have access to things that are behind the firewall. So you find devices that leak internal IPs, things like redirects. You find devices that can actually relay requests to another web server, and it has some kind of SSRF bug. You can then try hitting internal machines as well. The idea is you want to find a target that gets you further into the network than you currently are. And lastly, I want to mention that for IPv6, it's actually pretty useful for finding new ways into an organization, mostly because SMB and RDP both expose the Active Directory domain name in the results that show up in things like Shodan. So if you have a unique domain name that you use for your Active Directory, you can just go into Shodan and search for it. And oftentimes you'll find things like IPv6 addresses from mobile LTE cards for mobile laptops that are tied to your domain because the device becomes exposed directly to the internet, even though through a v6 address. And those are really difficult to find, by scanning by range, et cetera. So once you first get kind of in the door, what do you go after first? My usual rule of thumb on this stuff is don't go after the data, go after what has access to the data, go after the things that actually create the segmentation and the control. So one of my favorite targets is going after your network management systems, things like your SolarWinds or Libre NMS, things like that. Because once you pop one of these devices, it has the credentials to literally everything that controls the entire network. Like your segmentation doesn't matter if your attacker can actually cut a hole in the firewall themselves. And I've been in pen tests where we literally just added our own ACL to get into the PCI network because it's so much easier to do that than it is to find a way through it otherwise. So keep in mind that whatever you use for your control and your segmentation, the admin tools around that control are actually the easiest point for an attacker to influence things like segmentation. Separately, your administrators and developer workstations are also top tier. They typically have the ability to push code, to log into things. They've got safe credentials. Like keylogging your IT admin is the best way to get access to everything really quickly because they just go log into everything for you. And then you just come back a day later, take the keystrokes, and you go follow them along and do all the things. Granted, MFA makes it a little bit trickier these days, but depending on how they get MFA configured, if you're using like one password with the built-in MFA and one password, you just take over the desktop and you can basically just click all the way in. When you're looking for other internal targets, looking for developer resources like code repositories, CI/CD, artifact servers, et cetera, should be there. These tend to be really easy ways to get data. Oftentimes, internal packages that are created for internal development purposes have like sensitive data packaged up in the package itself. Like when it's a package you're not planning to make public, people often take shortcuts and build, put keys and things like that directly into the package itself. Another great technique internally is how do you find machines that are more than one network at once? runZero does tons of things around that, but effectively use things like NetBIOS, DCRPC, MDNS, SNMP, and quickly say, like, how do I get from 192, 168.0 to 10.0, whatever? And finding those multi-home machines is a really, really great way to get through those networks. And if you're running something like Kubernetes or another container environment like Docker on your workstation, those container environments effectively turn your PC into a router. And so you can actually route traffic through any interfaces your machine has, even if those interfaces are not related to your Docker configuration at all. If you use systems like BigFix or their kind of package deployment systems, those are also really great targets. IT folks often bundle all kinds of credentials and things like that directly into the logon scripts or into parts of the tools that are used by the logon scripts. So if you're able to go grab like the BigFix package repository or get the logon script directories and figure out where it's doing deployments from, you can find a lot of really interesting stuff in that stuff. And finally, anytime you find an end-of-life system on the network, there's usually a reason it's still there. Like people don't leave AS400s on the network because they want to, they do it because they can't literally get rid of them. And so they're stuck with these ancient machines, and those tend to be often the easiest ways into the environment as well. And then lastly here, if you find a printer, printers are great because people often set them up to do things like LDAP authentication, send email through SMTP. And if you wanted to, let's say, log into one of those printers and then change the configuration for LDAP or SMTP and point to your Flamingo instance, you'll basically just collect the password that device is configured to use. So printers tend to be great sponges for passwords, and they are really easy to rip passwords back out by changing the destination of the configuration. So once you're actually in the front door, you're actually on a machine internally, you've got some good data, how do you find the good stuff? You still try to avoid the front door, though. The front door tends to be what the people who design the system consider the way into it, like things that'll have MFA, lots of crypto, lots of authentication. So avoid that and instead go find things like the serial servers, the KVMs, the BMCs, all the other ways to get into a server that don't require actually logging into the server itself. Oftentimes you can find a KVM that has a currently logged in session to an important server, and the security of your KVM is often less strict than the security of the server it's protecting itself. Again, look for old equipment. There's usually a lot of really old stuff hanging out there, and it's typically the most important stuff. So if you find like a really old tape robot, well, that tape robot could be actually handling the backups for the most important data set. So going after the backend, the storage backends, whether it's like iSCSI, tape drives themselves, and skipping the servers themselves tends to be a much faster way to get the data. Instead of having to go fight through all the layers of protection app has, you just have to fight with a really old tape robot or a kind of crufty backup server that may be misconfigured. And finally, how do you get data back out? Well, what I've seen a lot of pen testers mess up is that they'll just like copy it out to an FTP site. There's a million things wrong with that. One, it's typically not encrypted, either in transit or at rest. It often uses weak authentication. So if another attacker happens to find it, they can steal your data as well. And that's not good. So the very first thing you want to do is like very well encrypt the data. Use something like H or Arch, use BitLocker to go. There's a bunch of different tools for it, but finally you want to encrypt it with something very strong and then transfer it out to a service that has strong authentication. You don't want your, pen test or simulated attack to result in a real breach because you mishandled the data that you took. And generally, the fastest way out of a network is to use what's already there. So if you're using AWS or Azure, use blob storage, use S3. It's just really hard to figure out whether a given S3 transfer is malicious or not malicious without having to decap the TLS. Another fun trick is you can actually store the data from your attack back into the web application itself. This is great if you need to steal like a whole bunch of passwords. You just basically copy them into the user profile field of your user account, and then log into the website and take all the passwords out of your user profile field on the top right. It's pretty common for folks not to put size limits on user visible fields in web applications, and those tend to be really great ways to pull data out. And then lastly, if you're trying to get data out and you have tools like Zoom and other video tools and running at the time, you can basically simulate those tools by using things like WebArtsy, Stun, and PDP to do the same type of what look like video streams, but those could really be your egress streams. And that's it for this. Thank you.
That's it, huh?
That's it. Oh, that was all? I'm sorry. Okay. Did we count 30? Did we count 30 tips?
No, we're not gonna have 30 in this one. This is the recap. This only was like what, like 11?
If you want to find the full slides, it's at the hdm.io website. But yeah, we've got tons of other materials here, so I want to hand it off to Matthew.
All right, Akheron Proxy. This is a tool I got roped in with my colleague Daryl Highland.
Oh, darn.
And Pierce Berry on the first iteration of this tool. Basically, you can go to the next slide. It's sort of a tool you break out when everything's maybe been done correctly from a device. So you're looking at a device. Do we look at, the network footprint of it? Maybe there's no open ports, there's no services running. The app is done correctly, right? Where do we go from here? Well, we're going to break it open. And in this case, what we're doing is we're looking at the communication on the wire, the UART between two chips, in this case, like the CPU and the BLE MCU. So you get in there and you scratch the contacts off to sort of sever them on the board. And then you solder in these fine wires and run them out to a board that we route to two FDDIs. So now you can connect your computer to both sides of this. If you go to the next slide, you sort of see the architecture here of how it fits with the tool, the Akheron Proxy in the center, being that it connects to two different UART connections that are then wired up to the main CPU and the BLE, and they sort of flip the transmit and receive and then proxy the data through. The tool allows us to sit on the wire and watch the traffic and then manipulate it or record it and play it back. And this lets you do interesting things like, inject packets based on what you're observing. But the big thing is sort of sitting on the wire and observing it while interacting with the device to try and figure out what do these packets mean. So you're looking at going back, you're manipulating a sensor, like in the case of the research that we presented. It was sort of a garage door retrofit kit with a Bluetooth sensor that transmits back the state of the door, whether it's open or closed, and it's really just a position-based sensor. So you play around with the sensor, you watch the messages, and you start to see patterns, right? Like, okay, this particular bit field seems to represent the state of the sensor, and the sequence of bits represent the BLE MAC address or something like that. And then you can start to take it and save the messages, play them back, manipulate some of the data, and observe like the impact on the app or the physical device. But it gives you a different, it obviously depends on how in depth your assessment of it is. This is certainly getting more in depth. But when you've looked at all the other pieces, sometimes, and they were done correctly, this is sort of where you go next, is on the actual board. And you get interesting situations where you can, manipulate the MAC address and send it through the system up to the cloud for MAC addresses that aren't even yours, maybe, for instance. Like, are you manipulating someone else's device? Which is sort of an interesting aspect where you might not, have those same opportunities from the app, perspective or whatnot, based on how the security has been handled in that case. But
Matthew,
this is initially, it was a quick hack thrown together by us, and this sort of next iteration is just some improvements, trying to give it a TUI, clean up some of the underlying code inside, and add some basic fuzz functionality. But it's sort of just a slow roll iteration on the tool, trying to get more exposure, get people to use it, encouraging PR's welcome sort of perspective, but really trying to get people throwing more devices at it to, see what maybe needs to be enhanced or come up with new ideas.
Matthew, can you share like why are people using these separate MCUs for things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth as opposed to creating a separate board for it?
Sure. So I think it just depends on the implementation. Obviously, like some, when you get like the expressive, like they're baking them all into one. Why someone would choose to do this, I'm not sure. It could just be costs or implementation decisions that they make where they are like separate on the board.
Where'd you get the name Akheron? I feel like I should know this.
That was Daryl's one. Ancient river in Greece, and it's sort of flowing, so the idea, this river flowing, we have data, it's flowing.
Oh, I love it.
Yep. So like top tier nerdery just all around. It's just
Right.
it's just great.
Basically.
Yeah. Love it.
All right, moving on.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. Okay, so my turn.
We've got 8 talks to get through, guys.
Yeah. We got what, 3 more talks to get through, so I'll be fast. All right. So yes, there and back again, which, speaking of top tier nerdery, we have to have a, Lord of the Rings title here. Or, the journey. Anyway, there and back again, the Hobbit's journey. Detecting OT devices across protocol gateways. Next slide, please. So this was a talk I gave at DEF CON. Really good turnout. If you were there, definitely drop a hi in the chat. It was really nice to see everybody. But this was a talk about how, as OT devices become more converged with IT devices, and that's the big thing nowadays, all of these old OT devices were speaking, and still speak, legacy OT protocols like Modbus and things like that, or a DNP3, which is a super fun protocol, and you should actually read all about DNP3. It's very popular in electrical distribution networks and nowhere else. But these protocols were designed before IP became sort of the de facto standard. It was around. Some of them predate IP, some of them post-date IP, but they were designed for different sorts of environments, things like that. But oftentimes now what happens is they'll take these protocols and they will just sort of shove them directly on top of TCP, right? So you just have a TCP session and it looks just like a serial cable and it's sending sending data along in these ancient protocols. And so how do you discover OT assets on the other side of these protocols? And so the talk talked about how you can do it with DNP3, which has its own separate addressing mechanism, and you got to do address discovery and stuff like that, and Modbus extensions. What this particular slide talks about is how you can do recursive enumeration of things in like a rack, for example. So a lot of OT devices, a lot of vendors will actually ship you an entire rack of multiple devices, and you only really know about the thing that's plugged into the network, right? So you've got an Ethernet connection and you plug it in there, industrial Ethernet, and there's all these other devices. And well, frankly, I want to know what those other devices are, right? Like I would do that even if I weren't getting paid. So it's great that I get paid. It's awesome. This is like the best of both worlds. So what you can do is you can say, hey, this is an example of Ethernet IP. You can say, hey, Ethernet IP, I don't want to know just about the Ethernet IP adapter. That's great. But I want you to also establish a connection using your connection manager object and the Common Industrial Protocol, SIP, and say, hey, SIP, tell me, connection manager object of the SIP protocol, tell me about how, what other things you know about, and give me a connection to that thing, and then forward this SIP message on to that thing, and then potentially ask that guy and forward it on and on and on until you get to all of the devices. Yes, SIP, yes, CIP, Common Industrial Protocol, not Session Initiation Protocol. There's also SIP, which is a standard in OT environments for security that is and safety, which is not a protocol. A lot of overlapping acronyms. So next slide, please. But long story short, you can do all sorts of neat things. Like you see right there on the, not the far left, but the one right next to it with the Ethernet Cat5 plugged in there. Cat6, I don't know. Are we up to Cat7 now? Probably. You can see the Ethernet IP adapter, and you can see that they're listed on the side. But you can also see that we've enumerated a serial adapter and a direct voltage controller thingy that is controlling something, scary and important. But that way, using these techniques, you can see everything on your OT network, which is what I want to do. So super fun. And I see a few of you were there at the talk. So hi, everybody. But yeah, that's that. Surprising density of cats, it's true. And yeah, on to HD again. So.
I really don't know how to annotate. How do I unannotate? There we go. All right. So I did a talk with Nicole Schwartz at the Dyna Initiative, and the idea was to talk about like communities, like how do you actually build a group? Like most of security, most of the industry really came out of building some sort of community first. Like a lot of folks who got into cybersecurity, InfoSec, whatever you want to call it, in the 90s, even early 2000s, really came out of IRC, like things like FNet, DALNet, et cetera. But then you also look at other things like open source projects, conferences, foundations, meetups. These are all kind of like the beating heart of the industry. They're kind of like how we meet friends, how people get jobs, how we generally start building these cool projects like the Akheron Proxy, things like that. These all come from getting like-minded together, people together to actually work on something together. So Nicole spoke from her perspective as the chairman of the Dyna Initiative, and I spoke from my perspective of both Metasploit project and also helping with local meetups. Tod B and I've been running a local meetup here for like 18, 19 years now in a row, so we're old. But you may find yourself running one of these too. And so it's worth kind of talking about some of the lessons learned from the process. So generally you want to try to find something that's already there. Like nobody wants to just start their own meetup unless, people are already going to one that's very similar. So if you can't find something that's a good fit, or you can't adapt what's already there to be kind of what you want, get some people together, get them to commit to like showing up repeatedly for a few months at least, just to kind of get things off the ground. Set your plans, say, here's what we plan to do, set your roles, here's our COC, get the word out, like what we're doing, find helpers, deputize leaders, really figure out how you want to deal with the trolls. And then there's tons of things around paperwork, finances, logistics, et cetera. But it's a lot of work. It's basically like a second job for a lot of this stuff. In most cases, you'll need a legal entity at some point. You'll need like an LLC or even a foundation if you want to go all the way down that path. You also need your domain names, your social media handles, your logo. And one thing that's really important, a lot of folks don't realize, is it doesn't matter like how small your community is. If you want to build enforce that name is yours, you have to get a trademark for it. And trademarks cost about $350 per category you register in. And for these types of things, you typically want to register 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 categories. So it's not a lot of money, but you don't have to go to a lawyer to do this stuff. You can go to uspto.gov and do a trademark application. They're not super complicated, especially if you're just trademarking like a plain text. And also keep in mind, if you have to change your name later, it's a huge pain. Both TDI, it used to be called TRCon. They had to go through this massive thing of changing the name, and it's really painful. runZero, of course, a lot of folks know us as our old name is Rumble, also incredibly painful. So picking a good name up front, making sure you have all your domains, all your handles, all your logos, and all your trademarks is really important. When you start getting into like running it, the hard truth is that you're going to have people who start off being really friendly and then start being jerks. And it's great for them to be a jerk once, you give them feedback, say, hey, that's not cool, but only give it to them once. Like you don't need to let anyone be a jerk more than once. At that point, ban them, move on. Take away their soapbox, kick them out of the group, whatever we need to do. But effectively, just anybody who tends to want to cause drama for drama's sake, you can just ignore and they'll go away eventually. Separately, no one's really going to care more about this project than you. So this will end up costing you a bunch of money. You're not really going to make any money running this stuff. If you do happen to make money, it's going to go towards paying your expenses, and you'll probably still come out negative. And you'll probably end up being the owner for this thing for life. If you stop doing it tomorrow, it may not happen anymore, and you have to be kind of okay with that. And these are just kind of the kind of standards of running a community. You need somebody to be the we and to all speak kind of in the voice of we, but really it's just one person. And one person is doing a lot of the work in these cases. Or in the case of like Tod, me, and Dustin, we hand it off back and forth and bring in helpers here and there. But you also want to think about like what's going to happen to your community after you shut it down. What happens if you get hit by a lottery and decide to move someplace else, or you otherwise don't have the health or interest in running this thing? figure out ahead of time. Do you want to hand it off to a similar community in town? Do you want to merge it with something else? Do you want to shut it down? Is there like a corporate sponsor that you think would be a good owner for it? And just keep in mind that it's almost safer most of the time to straight out kill it than let it go dormant. You see all kinds of cases where old meetups get hijacked for scammy things, and now a scammer has taken over a group of like 3,000 random people who normally meant to talk about the Ruby programming language are now basically just getting spammed crap. So it's almost better off to kill something than it is to let it just sit there, especially if you can't run it anymore. Just flat out say, it's dead. Don't use it anymore. It's done. Here's all the materials. Have fun. But the kind of zombie communities tend to be problematic in terms of how they get spammed and abused. That's it. If you have any questions on kind of community stuff, definitely drop me a line. We've got tons of other slides at that htm.io website. If you have any questions on that, with that, I'll hand it off to Tod to talk about the CV maturity panel.
Real quick, HD, there was one question about what do you think about going under another national org, like starting like local chapters of the national org?
Like OWASP and all that jazz.
Yeah.
I mean, the main question is like, will your ego be okay with that? Like, are you doing this because you're really proud of it and want it to be yours? And will you still feel that way if it goes into a bigger organization? Some people say, no, I don't really want to do all the work. I want to just have this thing, but it's not going to like take over my life, my identity. But if this is something that like you want to be the, the miniature king of for the long time, like you may not be willing to put it under something else like a national org. However, bringing something to a national org when you can no longer run it is definitely an option. There's many open source projects that have become part of OWASP as original developers need to find more free time. The Apache Foundation does something very similar for projects kind of going through the CNNF framework. So it's something to keep in mind for sure. But if it's something where you take a lot of pride in building the community, you may not be willing to put it under someone else's name. Then again, if it's something where you just want it to happen and you'd love to get some help, then going under a national group may be more helpful.
Yeah, and that's I love our local DC 512, our DEF CON group. I think it's great. I think it's well run, and it definitely wasn't always that way. The new leadership is excellent, and your mileage will definitely vary depending on your area code. But that's exactly the thing, right? Like our OWASP group, like is fine today, I guess. There's been periods where it wasn't. And so you run into that, like the long legacy of these national groups.
Yeah.
So
one more
a
thing.
lot easier to edit than to write, turns out.
And whenever they get over a certain size, they fragment, and that's just the name of the game. Like you get to about something people, and people don't like each other anymore. You spin off even cooler kids club, and then you build your next group, and off you go.
Yep. Nothing is permanent. That's why I get so many tattoos. All right. So I was on a panel, surprised. It was the CVE maturity panel. I believe the real title was What does CVE want to be when it grows up? The panel consisted of Bob Lord as moderator. You might remember Bob Lord as such films as SZA, Yahoo, the Democratic National Committee. He's a mucky muck. I was on it. Jerry Gamblin, former runZero guest, Jerry Gamblin, was also on it. Madison Oliver, and Chris Butera, who is the acting executive assistant director of cybersecurity at SZA. That is an extremely long title, and he's a very important man. Anyway, TLDR, we talked about CVE, we talked about the funding scare on April 15th of 2025. The opinion of the panel was, boy, that was scary. What are we going to do about that? The SZA representative said, like, actually, technically, there was no lapse in funding. It's like, yes, we know. We are still CVEing. But that is kind of immaterial to the panic. We talked a lot about CVE data quality. If you want to hit the next slide, if you please. And Jerry kind of stealth launched at this panel CNAscorecard.org. CNA is a CVE numbering authority, and he did a bunch of work on figuring out like what CNAs are doing good and which ones aren't. And that 2.1% number are, as of this screenshot, the number of CVE records that have a CPE string, which is purportedly how people identify software. And so you can see 97.9% of them don't bother. This is not great, but also CPE is not great. So this is a multi-year struggle that CVE is wrangling with. So like, yes, there is appetite in the world to make CVE records better. Also, we want CVE to stick around. Also, as you will no doubt know if you've ever been to another runZero event, CVE is not the end of your security story. It is but one of several things to look at. And that's all I'm gonna say on that. Not to shut down questions.
Any questions for Tod on the CVE side?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do questions at the end again too. So the other thing we
oh wait, hang on. I do have one more thing. Sorry. We are gonna have a reboot of this panel online somewhere, some Zoom call or something. So stay tuned on that. One of the feedback we got at B-Sides was like, hey, we didn't have any time for questions. And we're like, oh, cool. Let's have oops, all questions version of this. And so we're gonna do that. Well, stay tuned. It'll probably be in the next month-ish or so.
Cool. Thanks, Todd. So at DEF CON this year, we got to do a quick recap of the project Rob and I worked on last year, which is Shamble, which is a silly word for talking about how to automatically pop hundreds of thousands of shells off the internet, but also shells in your network too. So Shamble, just as a recap, last year we found at least 9 bugs. We kind of just got tired of counting at that point, but lots of like straight up root command execution, authentication bypass. There's some bugs that were just not fixed at all. Like for example, drop error still lets you do unlimited public key testing. You can take all 117 million GitHub keys for SSH and then just jam them through one poor little drop error server and figure out who on GitHub has access to that one server, and drop error will just run thousands of keys per second. So we were somewhat disappointed that after doing all this work, not only has the overall exposure of SSH not really changed much, we're kind of back to 2018 levels after a lot of the tar pits were taken down, but the number of like real servers really hasn't changed very much. So you look at like, down for 27 million here, but really no change in terms of like number of real SSH daemons. And then also no real change in the number of like straight up shells this tool dropped when throwing at the whole internet. So what we did differently this time is we said, let's go scan all the other ports running SSH. So we looked at Shodan and said, what are the other top 110 ports that run SSH commonly? And then we just did a full all the internet scan for those 110 top ports. And from that, we now got up to about 16.3 million in auth states, about 2 million more, and about 20,000 more shells, plus a bunch of new bugs. So what was a little bit sad about this whole thing is like, it didn't feel like anything we did the previous year made a difference. We literally found these same Digi routers exploitable on the internet with the same serial numbers and the same IP a year later. So I don't know if what we're doing works, but we're going to keep doing it anyways. We kept finding more unpatched Ruckus APs, even after the Ruckus folks updated their advisory to say like, yes, you really must patch these things. And we kept finding even more weird no-auth shells and really high ports. So the difference of the 110K to 130K included a lot of like really interesting new things we hadn't seen before. We'll talk about that in a second. Of these, the biggest question is like how many are honeypots? Like at least 10,000 are honeypots. And when we do the math on like all the ones that are not straight up vulnerabilities, it's really only about 50K that are real unintended shells on the internet. The rest are somewhat intended one way or another. One of the scary ones though is we found a carrier Ethernet switch. Here's kind of what it looks like when you're scrolling through shells for hours before DEF CON talk, trying to figure out what new bugs you found. So of course we probably missed a bunch just because it's a lot of data to go through, and we'll probably keep finding new bugs as we dig through it. Yeah, the 3 bugs we definitely identified were pretty funny. The first one was a carrier switch where there's about 15,000 of them, 14,000 across all of Asia mostly, and they control all the ISP links to each individual city. So you take down one of these things, you take out the entire village basically. Like everything runs across them from voice over IP to ISP residential to everything in between. These just have a straight up unauthenticated shell and port 10,022. If you use Shamble, it'll just drop you to a shell and that's it. Not super exciting, but we didn't see it before because we didn't cover that port. Similarly, there's a service called netconf that runs on port 830, typically over SSH as well. And it's more, people are probably familiar with it if you're looking at like the Erlang bugs with Cisco a while back. But same thing, if you set an authentication method of null byte or literally just skip authentication entirely, either one will work. You just drop straight to a netconf shell with no auth. Another fun one here is we're in the middle of disclosing these still, so there's no actual details, but this is a shell that when you, it'll do a no auth shell, but the shell itself asks you to log in again. And if you fail to log in 3 times in a row, it then drops you back to another shell. And then that shell actually allows you to do like everything from like X25 pad connections to outbound SSH and telnet. It's pretty bizarre. It's an old PBX switch. So we're working through the notifications on that side. Another really funny one here is the thing called the Cloud Bastion host. There's a Chinese ISP cloud provider that they say for them to provide support for your instances, you must run their diagnostic server on their instance. Well, that diagnostic server runs on port like 50,022, and it's written in Python with Paramiko. And it has a bug where if you authenticate using any random public key, just pick one at random, it'll just drop you right into a shell as user none uppercase N. So not really clear what you can do with it, but what's interesting about it is they contractually mandate that you install this backdoor in your server if you use this particular cloud ISP. So that's about it. There's a couple new features that I added to SSHamble in the last few days and kind of the last 6 months. There's one called skip version. So if you want to say like, let's not bother the OpenSH and dropper, let's only like hammer on the really weird stuff in the network instead. You give it a regex and it'll actually just skip all the common stuff in your environment. So a way to really speed up throwing SSHamble at your whole internal corporate network. Also, if you get tired of too many shells from a single machine, you can say just give me one shell per machine. That makes things a little bit faster. And if you need to go things like scrape the version numbers or inject a backdoor into all your routers, you can basically give it the session poke command now, and that'll have a bunch of text you just smash into any open shells as you find them. And that's useful for both like mass acquiring version numbers of affected devices to deploying a botnet or whatever else you feel like doing. Hopefully not botnets. And lots of little bug fixes, especially around things like shell interaction and the command shell, the control-E SSHamble shell itself. But you can find the latest version, shamble.com will take you to GitHub. Yeah, it's fun. So if you have any feedback on SSHamble, please let me know. And that back to Tod.
Back to me. One shell only. I had to. All right. Vulnerability haruspicy. This is a labor of love that I undertook when I first started here at runZero. And then I finally got to present at Black Hat, which was great. But basically, this is the slide version of a paper that I wrote a few weeks ago called Divining Risk. If you just Alta Vista runZero Divining Risk, you'll find it. It's a delightful paper. And next slide, please. I talk about CVSS, which is the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, EPSS, which is the Exploit Prediction Scoring System, and the sadly unlogoed SSVC, which is the Stakeholder Specific Vulnerability Categorization System used in federal government and a couple other places. And so if you're interested in that, you can go read the paper. It's called, like I said, it's called Divining Risk. I think the Black Hat presentations are free until September 15th if you want to grab them, maybe. I'm not super sure how they do it, but I will say I was very pleased with myself when I did the Black Hat presentation because I had a 30-minute slot and I came in at 29 minutes and 57 seconds. So good on me. I nailed it. And the secret was I rehearsed. And so if you're looking to speak at events, I hate rehearsing so much, but I had a heart-to-heart with Soldier of Fortran, and he was like, dude, you have to rehearse. I'm like, okay, fine. And then I did it, and I hated it, but it's like leg day, like you hate it, and then you're like, oh, dang, my calves look great. And I'm mad that my calves look great now. So that's next slide, please. I believe that's the only slide I have. Oh, no, wait, of course. No. And during the course of the talk, we also here at runZero released a fun little web widget called EPSS Pulse. You can use this to explore one of the findings of the paper, and that is the EPSS scores, which is a range from 0 to 100, at 4 decimal places, of percentage of chance of this vulnerability is going to be exploited in the next 30 days. Okay. If you want to get into that, read the paper. But what this thing does is I want to know about what changed yesterday. And so like in this example screenshot from August 8th, right? We had 4, 5, God, I can't count. I'm bad at science, but 5 vulnerabilities that like shot up between like 30 and 52% there in one day. Why is that? Probably a couple reasons. Things like a nuclei template was just published, or a Metasploit module was just published, or just listed on the CAB. These are things that like tend to like jump these scores by maybe 30 or 40 points. Sometimes vulnerabilities go down. CVE 2015 1349 used to have a 60% chance of showers tomorrow, in the next 30 days, and then that dumped by half. I don't know why. I don't know if this is it is statistically significant, but I don't know if it's practically significant. I don't think this means like, oh, well, you should have been worried about this 2015 bug, but now you don't have to. Like, I don't think that's what it's telling me. So I don't know. More research needed, and I will rely on you, gentle audience, to tell me maybe why these things move around, and maybe we can figure it out together. That's the idea. Next slide, please, which I believe will transition
Yep.
us to rapid response roundup.
So Todd,
Yeah.
I know what
Mhm.
haruspicy means, but I want to just, I just want to make sure that you know what it means. So if
Yeah.
you, yeah, so if you could just, I just want to verify that
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
yeah,
What do you not know mean? I mean, what do know means? I missed the important noun there.
oh, haruspicy.
Oh, haruspicy. Yes. Haruspicy is the art of divining the God's will through the examination of entrails. So typically takes the form. There's still people doing it today. Of you have a sacrificial ram or sheep, and then you open that bad boy up. You take out the liver and you look at all the weird little patterns. Livers are crazy. Mammalian livers are amazing because I kind of went deep on this. Um, I'll talk about this for an hour.
Okay.
But basically, it's very occult. It was probably most popular among the Etruscans, which I felt like, there was a Tuscany joke in there somewhere with like the
Mm.
B-Sides venue being Tuscany, and I'm like really enamored of the Etruscans right now. Anyway, yeah, you read livers, you figure out is tomorrow's military campaign going to be good? Yes or no? You line up all your good and bad omens, of which there are thousands. Don't worry, um, and then you like figure out if it's a positive or negative result. So a delightful bit of soothsaying. I strongly encourage everyone to get into it, unless vegetarian, vegan, etc. Good content warning me. Anyway, I
Thank
thought
you, Todd.
that it was like very relatable to like how we deal with vulnerability risk scoring.
There we go. Okay, that,
Yes.
yeah. Yes, reading the birds. Yes, reading the
Uh-huh.
tea leaves. So yes, rapid response roundup. Next slide, please. So this month, we're going to talk. There were lots of rapid responses. Poor Matthew was working hard this month, but three of interest. He
Uh-huh.
works hard every month. He's great. Um, three of interest. So we've got SharePoint, Ruckus, and Brother. And the Brother one is close to my heart. That's fun. But
Yeah.
let's start with SharePoint, if we could, please.
Yeah.
So next slide. So
Rob, recap about
more like over SharePoint. Am I right?
SharePoint.
So SharePoint had a classic deserialization bug where you could pass up data that was deserialized from .NET assemblies, and it would execute some of that code, and you had just good old fashioned server-side RCE, which is lots of fun. The important thing to note about this, or the most important thing to know about this, is that it is being actively exploited in the wild. I believe it is on the Kev, but there is definitely evidence that it is being exploited in the wild. So you should, if you have runZero, and you should definitely check the output of the rapid response query to let you know if you have a SharePoint server that needs to be patched, because you should probably patch it, because it is getting actively exploited in the wild with server-side RCE. But lots of fun. It's always nice to see a classic kind of, well, always nice to see a classic kind of vulnerability like that. So next slide, please.
Yeah, Ruckus. Matthew, tell us about Ruckus.
Yeah, they had eight vulnerabilities across three primary product lines: the Smart Zone, the Virtual Smart Zone, and the Network Director. And then, so some of those were physical devices, some of them were virtual devices. It was a nice collective of eight, everything from authentication bypass, hard-coded secrets, all the way up to remote code execution via some OS command injection. So patch them. Patch the thing.
That's usually how
I
our
think,
stories end.
interestingly enough, I think if I recall, this one's been a little while. I think some of the smart zones were end of life as well, so that's not great. But I think they had patches for a lot of versions. The fun thing I remember from doing the research was it also led to me adding additional fingerprints for other Ruckus products, so that's always good.
Yeah.
I do want to I want to publicly call out Matthew. He really he just knocks it out of the park with these fingerprints and these rapid responses. Like it's just great. So Matthew, be slightly embarrassed in public as I tell you how awesome you are. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Rob.
Yes. Brother.
All right. This is a little bit of a double dip. We talked about brother printers last month, and we went over all the drama. The TLDR is Stephen Fewer over at Rapid7, friend of the show, did some excellent research on brother printer, brother firmware, which shows up in like 3 or 4 other vendors. Found some bugs. The most interesting to me anyway was a bug where like the serial number of the device is exposed over the network in a funny way, right? And who cares? Serial numbers. We all have them. And but these serial numbers are special because you can derive the default administrator password for the printer from the serial number. No bueno. And so we disclosed all that. That is now done. We have published a CVE, and that CVE number is CVE 2025-8452 for those of you playing along at home. We initially wanted to like just shove it into Rapid7's CVE on this. They're like, oh, it's also here, and then it was a whole thing. So we ended up publishing our own. runZero is not yet a CVE numbering authority. So we did do it through AHA, which gave me license to start experimenting with the GCVE numbering system. And so I'll just drop that very convenient GCVE number in the chat there. You can go Google that and find exactly the same info. But if CVE ever were to go away, don't worry. We have you covered on GCVE, I guess. I don't know. It's like, it's been kind of fun to figure out how this whole spec works. And I'm trying to like implement against, the docs that are out there. And I'm trying not to like make it other people's problem of like, your docs are stupid or anything like that. I'm like, okay, well, I will just take the minimal from the docs and try to implement it there. You can play along at home if you follow me on InfoSec Exchange. So that's brother. If you haven't changed your brother, first off, if you didn't know that your brother printer had an administrator password, it does. And if you haven't changed it, you oughta.
But and as HD said in the chat, oh, go ahead, HD.
So what I love about this is like the only reason these things don't have default passwords anymore is because it's now illegal in the state of California. Yes. So just like the Supermicro IPMIs, they now start with a randomized password, just like brother printers now do. So depending on like where a company's based, you may or may not see them have to require a default password. Yeah, I don't know. Is it better because now people don't change the password because they assume it's secure?
It does look secure because like these brother passwords do have things like pound signs in them, dollar signs and stuff in them, so they look nice. But the issue is like, oh, but if you're advertising your MAC address or your serial number or something like that, you're probably advertising the key material as well. So you still can't just like blast admin all over the place, which is I think a positive. But you do have to do like at least a 4 more lines of code in order to blast the of admin blah blah blah, right? So
it's amazing. I have the same combination on my luggage. But
it's all sad when like the techniques we use for doing better like device discovery, like people call them out as vulnerabilities, like, oh man, no, we can't use that for actually doing great discovery anymore. We have to come up with another leak, but it is what it is. Like a large portion of runZero's like detection capabilities are just things we haven't gotten a CVE for, but might need one at some point.
Apologies for the slide, by the way. I did not fill in the actual time. It was not released at 10:100 p.m.
I do want to point out we do collect the ways we collect serial numbers is kind of incredible. I've always loved how it's not just serial numbers. runZero collects so many little cool bits of information that you never know how they're going to turn out to be interesting, and they always turn out to be interesting, and I love it. Anyway, okay, sorry, that's enough nerding out for a second. All right, so
I think that might be it. So we'll take questions.
Yeah.
We got a little time here.
Yeah, we've got a few minutes left. If there are any questions, type fast in the chat. Here in Zoom land, if you're watching this in the future, I have no way to answer questions here in the past.
Not even with like some sort of liver involvement. You could.
You know what?
will be asked.
I've been reading Peripheral by William Gibson. This exact problem of being unable to answer future questions in the past is addressed in Peripheral.
So spoiler alert to everyone who hasn't read the book.
It's about time travel, all right? That's like on the cover. It's fine. It's not a spoiler.
I actually have a paper copy on my desk. I've been meaning to pick it up and read it. I was going to read it on the trip back or summer camp, and then I didn't. So
yeah.
Any questions?
I'm reading this instead of rereading Neuromancer because I feel like Neuromancer will just make me sad.
Neuromancer it's a great book. It is.
Hey man, I was gunning for that dystopian future when I was 15 and I first read Neuromancer, but like I said, I think if I read it today, I'll be sad.
We're making good progress in Snow Crash, at least. We've got our, the ladies' manual here is now our chat GPT. We're getting there.
Yep. Dystopian, but instant food delivery. I mean, really.
Hey, high quality pizza in under 30 minutes. Can't argue with that.
Awesome. Thanks, folks, for coming.
All right.
Yeah.
Later on,
Thanks,
everybody.